day, good evening, everybody. My purpose today in coming on is to say, hey, this is number 1998 in this series, of which 1942 were on consecutive days. So most days I was consecutive for 5.5 years. I'm going to continue until the number 2000, which is the day after tomorrow. And then after that, I plan to possibly do at least a few times a week. That's the current plan. I'm still under construction, so I'm not sure. But tonight I'll just stay on for a little while and read you for a little bit from the novel written by Gavin Newsom, who is our California governor. Some people hate his guts, some people love him to death. He's 2 years younger than I am, so I love him to death. It's like that. He's from San Francisco, I'm from San Francisco. So, that kind of thing. I was on page 12, and I'm going to read you a little bit. Let me see how far I'm going to read tonight. I'm just going to read a little bit because this is very entertaining. And plus, I attended Lowell High School and I attended UC Berkeley. So I'm going to maybe read to page 19. And in the meantime, if we get interrupted by a call or anything, it's because the apartments are flooded, some of them, not mine, but Anyway, his son William, my grandfather, he says, saw the boom after World War II as his. Oh, hey. He served as a San Francisco. The first William Newsom, good sense of humor, Irish handshake immigrant, said that his great grandfather turned into a Democrat out of his compassion for the working man. He served as the San Francisco Commissioner of Public Works, a member of the kitchen cabinet of Mayor James Rolph, Rolph, later Governor Rolph, and then a builder who erected Commerce and Lowell High Schools. That's their connection to Lowell High School. His son William, my grandfather, saw the boom after World War II as his chance to build housing tracts that looked out to the bay. This turned him into the first wealthy member of the Newsom clan, but it didn't turn him into a Republican. He was a kingmaker, and the first king he helped make was Edmund Pat Brown. My grandfather, whose nickname was the Boss, served as manager or treasurer for several of Brown's campaigns, from district attorney to attorney general to the 32nd governor of California. He was one of the thinkers behind the throne, and the trust between the two men uh, was such that Brown asked the boss to be godfather to his daughter Kathleen. That's very Irish. And then, as such things happened, the two men had a falling out over Governor Brown's refusal to appoint my grandfather to a board regulating the banking industry. As the Newsom version goes, this was because Governor Brown knew that my grandfather held views that would have brought the hammer down on bankers abusing the citizenry. 67. What's that? What's that? The old pals parted ways and never talked again. Whenever Pat Brown needed to compare notes with my grandfather, he did so through my father, the third William, who happily played intermediary, if for no other reason than the material it might furnish for a story. My father had literary ambitions as he pursued his bachelor's degree in French literature at the University of San Francisco. USF is a Catholic university. His dreams of a life of letters were not discouraged. In fact, they were nourished by his father, who once admonished him, "You leave the money making to me, and I'll leave the Shakespeare to you." By the mid 1950s, my father had determined that he didn't have the chops to be a writer. Was there a stab at a novel or a book of poems, a manuscript he squirreled away? He never said, and I've never found evidence of such. Clutching his degree in French literature and not sure what to do next with his life, he decided to pursue both law school and a master's degree in English. He attended Berkeley Law, left partway through, graduated from Stanford Law, and then stayed on campus to earn an M.A. in English, taking classes from Professor Newell Ford, an eminent Shelley scholar. This is how my father found himself in the late 1950s, quote, flat broke and alert to a modest financial opportunity which arose at the Palo Alto Mental Health Facility. In Dad's telling, the clinic was offering $200 a day for any brave soul willing to submit to experiments that Dr. Russell Lee, 1L, was conducting, I mean, in Russell, was conducting with the drug LSD, which was barely known and still quite legal. Ooh. My father accepted the offer to spend 2 days under the influence of the psychedelic, during which time he was prompted by the doctors to recite the poems of Gerard Manley Hopkins and the other, quote, tactile, end quote, verse, and to document any relevant insights from the drug on a tape recorder. It was not long thereafter that my father divined a fork in the road, a career teaching literature to college students or a career practicing the law. Out of no special ardor, he picked the latter, where to hang his shingle. In pursuit of an answer, he scooped up his T.S. Eliot and William Blake and headed to Lake Tahoe, to the old Squaw Valley Ski Resort. I've been to all these places, which had played host to the 1960 Winter Olympics. This was the same resort that his no wonder they were so famous. This was the same resort that his father, thanks to that past friendship with Governor Brown, had been leasing for $1 a year, a deal that Richard Nixon, running for governor against Brown, tried to turn into a scandal. There, beside the resort's swimming pool, sometime in the summer of 1965, William Newsom III made the acquaintance of my mother, Tessa Menzies, Menzies, a, quote, tall brunette with long legs, end quote, and a wicked overhead tennis serve who had only recently graduated from Lowell High School in San Francisco. Tessa came from a family of brilliant and daring misfits who had carved new paths in botany and medicine and left wing politics. Her father, Arthur Menzies, who had served in the army during World War II and endured a brutal captivity in a Japanese prisoner of war camp, was an expert in horticulture, especially California wildflowers. Among the family secrets was his decades long battle with alcoholism and depression. His life of flora, it was said, wasn't enough to blot out the monsters of his wartime confinement. To the horror of my mother and her two sisters, he ended up committing suicide in his bedroom with a 38 caliber bullet to the head. He was 57 years old and left behind no note. That's there's a 4-acre botanical garden full of native plants in Golden Gate Park, named after my grandfather Menzies, whose letters from the war I keep in a black binder. Hi, Ashish. My mother's mother, Jean Addis Menzies, was a nurse and Addis, I guess, was a nurse and an actress who spoke French and Russian and founded an avant-garde theater group in San Francisco. She was said to bear an uncanny resemblance to Katharine Hepburn and went by the odd stage name of Trigger Addis. In the 1930s, when she was barely 20, her socialist passion took her to Soviet Russia, where she mixed it up with other young American Reds. This was my capital R. This was my grandma Jean, who understood my childhood struggles with dyslexia like no one else in the family. She was the daughter of Dr. Thomas Addis Jr., a pioneer in kidney disease research at Stanford University, who conceived the so-called Addis count, a method to diagnose kidney function. My great grandfather worked to devise a special diet for patients suffering from deadly forms of nephritis, especially Bright's disease. Dr. Addis was a tall and lanky Scotsman, which explained the tallness and lankiness of my mother and me, and he was said to be a man of great humility who smoked a pipe as he listened with much care and discernment. When he talked, he spoke in a near whisper. My great grandfather's anti fascist policies, however, were so fierce during the McCarthy era that the FBI suspected him of being a communist and tapped his phones. I tried now and then to piece together our history, but it remained a narrative shot full of holes. When it came to her past, my mother was almost completely mute. There was no use probing her. She saw no need to revisit or share any part of it. My father, whose highest regard was reserved for literature and history and storytelling, tended to mythologize, if not sanitize, the family history of both sides. I'm not sure he believed that the messy truth of it was relevant or even interesting to me, that it served any purpose, or that I would derive any lessons from it for my own life. California was a grand stage of reinvention, a place where you whitewashed the past and painted afresh. And so it would be with his only son, he must have thought. In his defense, the kid I was gave him plenty of reason to believe that any such transmission of history was fated not to hold. This is not to say that later in my life, when I became a San Francisco supervisor and then the mayor of the city, I did not press him to give me more, and he did not regale me with with his best stories. And yet, looking back, I have the sense that he used his gift of gab and wit as a shield that would not allow me to peek deeper inside him to understand the ways family history had bent him and thus me. Our past, it now seems to me, was all too painful for either of my parents to touch. In her deference to silence and secrets, my mother did not possess the language to delve into the complications and tragedies of her parents and grandparents, much less convey the story to me and my sister Hilary. My mother lived an entire life never making sense of it to herself and believed to the day she died that this was okay. My father was harder to figure. He had the language in all its abundance, and yet the times he decided to share his stories with me, his telling of the past felt like the same performance over and over, a script all too familiar. Now I'm going to say that I've been told that when people are telling a story that's true, it comes with different variations every single time. But if they're telling a story that's made up, then they're gonna use it for word exactly the same every single time. So this sounds like it's all made up. Sounds like it to me. But anyway, we continue. And so I am left to guess, he says, among many other details, how all that Menzies and Addis family lore, English and Scottish to boot, got added to the Irish Newsoms. In their hasty courtship, did my mother find a way to reach inside herself and share her family history with my father? Did this then become the glue that bound them? My search for answers sooner or later led me to the transcript of a 2008 interview that historian Martin Meeker conducted with my father for UC Berkeley's Bancroft Library. Among the many colorful stories he passed on to the historian are glimpses into his infatuation with my mother. I just fell for her, he said. She was 18 when we met and going to Chico State. She was 19 when we married in 1966, and I was 32. Scandalous. I had a roommate that was 19 and her boyfriend was 35, and that was scandalous, I recall, because I was 18 and I thought, a 35-year-old man coming into my room? No. And so he wasn't allowed. I was born on October 10th, 1967. Ooh, he was born a few days before I got to the United States. So he's only a year younger than me. That's what you meant when you said 67. Okay. Accompanied by the apparently weighty decision to not name me William the Fourth. My father named me Gavin in honor of Gavin Maxwell, who wrote the literary masterpiece Ring of Bright Water about his remote house in coastal Scotland, where he raised several wild otters as pets. Ooh. Hillary was born on December 24th, 1968, which made us close to, but not quite Irish twins. We lived in an apartment on Octavia Street that bordered the Marina District with a pet otter named Potter, who would fall asleep at the edge of our parents' bed. The animal was so well trained that Dad would play a game of hiding his keys in the couch, and Potter would slide over and retrieve them. I was still an infant when Potter developed the habit of nibbling on my toes. Mom apparently laid down an ultimatum. It's either the otter or us, she informed Dad. He found a wildlife sanctuary for Potter, and we replaced him with bunny rabbits, a guinea pig, and a horse named Tanka that we stabled in the foothills. Now, this is a well to do family. My father, a dedicated board member of the Environmental Defense Fund, made it his practice to take on legal cases that were causes. This almost always meant a lot of work rewarded with modest pay. When he later found his way onto the bench, he presided over cases that challenged California institutions, such as the Bohemian Grove, the 2,700-acre campground in Sonoma County, where some of the world's most powerful men communed among the redwoods. Gah! If you're watching this, this is the one you were talking about today. It's called Bohemian Grove in Sonoma County. Now we know. Just a coincidence that my brother and I were talking about it today. I didn't know about it. The Grove's management, the Grove capital G, enforced an all male hiring policy for its workers that my father decided wasn't exempt from the state's fair employment law. His ruling against the Grove did not sit well with the bigwigs of San Francisco, several of them his good buddies. As to the question of why our parents divorced after a few years of marriage and Dad moved to Lake Tahoe, 200 miles away, he had a rather inadequate answer. In a story that lacked his usual flourishes, he told the historian that the blame rested with politics. During the very period in which his children were born, he had made the mistake of running for office not once, but twice. This he did at a vehement suggestion of a group of men who were or would shortly become the most prominent and powerful politicians in Northern California, including Willie Brown, George Moscone, and Phil and John Burton. Oddly, my father's first my dad knew George Moscone too. Oddly, my father's first campaign for San Francisco County Supervisor had him running against several candidates, including his brother in law, Ron Pelosi. And though Dad won almost 57,000 votes, a respectable showing, he lost. The second race for state senator was against the even more formidable Milton Marks. I got a letter from him once for my scholarship, a Republican who had earned considerable support among Democrats in San Francisco. It wasn't a landslide by any means, but he lost again. Looking back, my father considered both stabs at elected office to have been fool's errands. In his estimation, he had let his ego get the best of him. The back to back campaigns, he explained, left him in such deep financial debt that he could no longer face our mother. He did not mention to the oral historian any need to face his two children, and I am left to conclude that it was his calculation that he could and would make it up to me and my sister. Quote, I had in effect a kind of breakdown, nervous breakdown, he said. I was in financial tatters. I'd lost two elections and I thought, get me out of here or something. We went to marriage counselors for a while, didn't work. I remember one marriage counselor, and every time we would go to see him, he would fall asleep. Tessa said to me, Bill, let's leave and save the money. I was in bad shape emotionally, and that is the principal reason I moved to the Lake Tahoe area. I needed a complete change of scenery. So that's interesting. I didn't know he was related to Nancy Pelosi. And Dad wasn't the only Newsom. I'm going to go past page 19. Dad wasn't the only Newsom in the room when he sat down to record his oral history. Beside him were his sister Barbara and his brother Brennan, the last surviving children of William the Boss and Christine Newsom. Their three siblings had died of cancer at ages far too young. On the transcript pages, the voices of my father, aunt, and uncle are all too alive. Their memories hadn't yet dimmed, and their storytelling skills remained potent, if not at their absolute peak. It didn't hurt that each of them happened to have lived a remarkable life. Uncle Brennan, as was family tradition, had attended Notre Dame de Victoire and St. Ignatius College Prep before thinking he might become a priest. SI is in San Francisco. He spent 2 years at the Jesuit seminary and then went off to earn his law degree. He was a boxer and a lover of nature, a trial attorney who was a fierce advocate for those without a voice. He possessed a wit that lit up rooms and could expound on a wide range of topics, from Russian military development to the verse of Valery, Valery, without ever sounding like a know it all. Aunt Barbara, whose political acumen came to the aid of Governor Pat Brown more than once, had gone back east for college before marrying a Bay Area boy, Ron Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's brother in law. In 1970, my Aunt Barbara and Uncle Ron were out to dinner when an electrical fire ignited their home in Presidio Heights, killing their two daughters. My cousin Cynthia, who presided as godmother at my baptism, was only 13 years old. Her little sister, Caroline, was one. Their Chinese American babysitter, Gwen Yang, who was 35, died in the blaze. My other two Pelosi cousins, Matthew, 9, and Brennan, 11, somehow survived. This was the great challenge thrust in front of my Aunt Barbara during her middle years, and she responded by delving deeper into knowledge, into paleontology and archaeology, and into founding an educational retreat for women in Marin County. She and my uncle eventually divorced, and she went back to using her Newsom name. In 1980, President Carter appointed her to represent the United States at the United Nations, and later she directed Georgetown University's Italian Studies program outside Florence, Italy. For the first half hour of the oral history session, my father, Judge Newsom, mostly kept quiet, deferring to his younger brother and sister, which made sense because he wasn't the domineering type, and there were 2 more interview sessions planned with him alone. When he did join in, the 3 siblings began to aid and abet and sometimes correct each other's recollections. They practically made a sport out of seeing which one of them could furnish the ultimate adornment to the perfect family story. There's the classic one about their grandmother, Anna Brennan, an indefatigable spirit who lived in their home as they were growing up on Jefferson Street in the Marina District. She was an elfin lady whose father had been a horse trainer in a place called Tuppercurry in County Sligo, Ireland. Here in America, her husband, John Brennan, a San Francisco longshoreman by way of County Sligo too, died in his 40s, leaving her to raise their 7 children alone. My father recalled that his grandma Anna would awaken at 5 a.m. sharp to bake him and his brothers and sisters soda biscuits in the shape of a fish. She had an easy sense of humor in spite of the tough life she was called to live, and she liked nothing more than to read the greenish paper on which the San Francisco Chronicle printed its sports news. I remember that, including the pony races at Bay Meadows Racetrack. That's not far from here. She would dope out the horses at night and decide which ones to wager on the next morning. One night in her bed, she was visited by a vision of Saint Teresa, who was holding up 5 fingers on one hand and 3 fingers on the other. This she considered propitious. This she took to mean the 5th horse in the 3rd race. I'm going to walk up and make a bet with Moon, she told my young father. Moon was her bookie who operated on the corner of Scott and Chestnut. I know where that is, where he sold 4 newspapers: the Call Bulletin, the News, the Chronicle, and the Examiner for a nickel each. Remember the Examiner? His work as a newspaper hawker certainly didn't explain how Moon was able to tool around town in a brand new 1949 Lincoln Continental. Dad, I can't quite figure it out. My father, a curious boy, said to his father, Moon is a paper seller. 67. Yeah, you love that number, don't you? Moon is a paper seller, and he's driving a Lincoln Continental? His father's reply was close to deadpan. A substantial inheritance Moon's parents left him. A substantial inheritance. They're saying it over and over again because they're making it up. My great grandmother Anna grabbed her little maroon coat with a fur collar, her fancy hat with flowers, her round glasses and wood cane. You mean the sixth horse in the seventh race, right? Her round glasses and wood cane, and hightailed it to catch the next bus out to Bay Meadows. This would be this would not be family legend if the fifth horse in the third race had not placed first and she had not come home the winner of the daily double. She knocked on my father's bedroom door the next morning and asked him, "Want to come get the money? Let's take the F car to Scott and Chestnut." When they arrived at Moon's Corner, the bookie looked to be in a panic. "Mrs. Brennan," Moon pleaded, "get lost." Great Grandma Anna was sure that Moon was in a reneging mood. "You owe me $23. I've got the bet right here." Moon looked pained. As it turned out, he wasn't looking to cheat her. He was under surveillance by the cops at that very moment. As they arrested Moon and dragged him away, my great grandmother began to tear up. It wasn't the money she was crying over. Rather, she was certain it was her stupidity that had gotten Moon busted. My father's father, Boss Newsom, made a few phone calls to the judge and the district attorney. Moon got off light. If the bookie held anything against my great grandmother, he didn't hold it for very long. My grandfather treated Moon and his wife to a free vacation at the Newsoms' Inn in Sonoma County along the Russian River. My grandfather even dug into his own pocket to cover the winnings Moon owed. The boss quietly handed the $23 to my father and said to give it to my great grandmother with a little white lie attached. "Moon sent you this money," my father told her. "He says no hard feelings." 60 years later, my father was laughing as he finished telling the story to the oral historian. "That's a true story," he said. My Aunt Barbara nodded. "It's so true," she said. My father wanted the historian to know book wanted the historian to know that his grandma Anna was the one elder in the family not afraid to display her love. "Nobody ever could get me to eat peas. I would never eat peas. She mashed them in the mashed potatoes and I ate peas." She was a marvelous person. She had come from a clan completely sympathetic to the Irish Republican Army and made her loyalties freely known. "Up the long ladder, she taught me that." Uncle Brendan recalled the old Irish ditty, and then the three siblings began to recite the verse, "Up the long ladder and down the short rope, to hell with King Billy and God bless the Pope." Interesting. So that was up to page 24. And next time, if there is a next time, we will read from chapter 2. This is Young Man in a Hurry, a memoir of discovery by Gavin Newsom. He is the current governor, I think he is, current governor of California. Yes, he is. Don't worry about it, Mary. Okay, so I will talk again later. Thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate your watching all the way to the end of chapter 1. Um, this is my episode 1998. I am, my energy wanes and waxes and wanes about this. So, if there's a lot of you, I'll keep on doing it. If not, I don't know what to do yet. If you go to my Facebook page, you can find me um, deciding what to do. And come to Substack. I am Yin Yang 31. I am also Yin Yang 2, numeral 2, or numeral 31, either of which or both. Please subscribe to me because then I can go live over there when I have 10 subscribers. Thank you for subscribing to me here. I saw 2 subscribers just joined tonight, and please like the video so that the algorithm says, "Hey, let's see her more," and all that. Okay? Thank you for coming. I'll talk to you later. And I always mention old Kinderhook. Okay? Old Kinderhook, 8th President of the United States, who always wanted to make sure things were okay, from Kinderhook, New York.